Welcome everyone to our first installation of Green Outlook, a student perspective. This is a platform for our world's future environmental leaders to connect and contribute to global conversations about the environment. Joining us today are 6 university students, panellists who are hoping to help bridge the gap between university students and industry professionals. We encourage our viewers, both students and professionals, to engage in our discussions by commenting on this post and continuing on our dialogue. So this is a student-developed initiative by Gopika and myself. I am an undergraduate environmental engineer in my 3rd year, and I am passionate about waste management and reducing our waste to create more of a circular economy. So I wanted to start this with Gopika to create opportunities for university students to build confidence, share their ideas, and connect with like-minded students to help build better networks of us future leaders and connect us with the current environmental leaders and create those discussions that we need for change to happen. So I'm going to pass on to our co-host, Gopika, to introduce herself.
Thank you, Selina. Hello and welcome. My name is Gopika Venugopal. I'm currently pursuing my postgraduate studies in environmental engineering at Griffith University. My interests lie in environmental management and policy. Prior to my time at Griffith, I was actually working in the chemical engineering sector, and I feel like this has helped me attain a deeper understanding of industrial processes, the impact it has, and the mitigation measures that are put in place currently. And this is the reason I feel like Selena and myself, we are very empowered to start this initiative, Green Outlook, to bring in new voices and new ideas to just join into the conversation. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our brilliant panelists for this event, the first installation of Green Outlook. Starting off with our first panelist, Sarah Pratten. She is currently doing her master's in dentistry. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi. So as Gopika said, I'm doing my Masters of Dentistry, and they don't really cover very much, if at all, on waste management or anything like that, but it's been something that I'm quite interested in, especially because there is a significant amount of single-use waste in the health sector. So I've just kind of implemented in other areas of my life, and I want to get more into it.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. Our next panelist is Sayli Katewale. She is currently pursuing her master's in environmental engineering. Welcome, Sayli.
Hi, thank you. So, yeah, I'm in my 3rd year. I'm in my 1st year of Masters of Environmental Engineering, and I'm a chemical engineer graduate. So for me, during my bachelor's, I didn't have access to a lot of environmental engineering studies, but when you work in the industry and when you learn more about chemical engineering, you understand that there is so much more harm happening than just the production, and how the economy needs to be improved. It's just not about improving it, how in terms of money, but how about giving it to the world. So that's why I am here, because I want to understand the perspective of people around me and how I can help the world around me.
Absolutely, that's wonderful. Thank you, Sayli. Next, I'd like to introduce Janet Forster, who is currently doing her 3rd year in environmental engineering. Welcome, Janet.
Hi, everyone. I'm Janet. I'm doing my environmental engineering undergrad in my 3rd year, and I'm interested in the short and long-term environmental effects of human influences on natural systems. And I'm hoping through Green Outlook, I guess that I can engage in discussion and share my opinions with other students. And yeah.
I hope the same, just to get the conversation started. Thank you, Janet. Introducing Yuichi Strawberry, who is currently pursuing her degree in engineering and mathematics. Welcome, Strawberry.
Thank you. So yeah, as Gopika said, I'm doing my undergraduate degree in engineering and mathematics. I go to QUT. I believe everyone here goes to Griffith, if I'm not mistaken. Although I'm doing mathematics and engineering and it's not super related to the environment, I do have a keen interest in sustainability and in the environment as well. And I think doing operations research and systems analysis, I think it'd be interesting to see if I can help businesses sort of transition into a greener sort of future for and a greener business plan for themselves whilst maintaining output. So I think it'd be really interesting in Green Outlook to have professional opinions from people who are skilled in the discipline.
Definitely. I think having fresh voices from someone who is not from this particular background can really improve the conversation. So thank you so much for being here. Next, I would like to introduce Jacob Suchting, who is currently doing his third year in environmental engineering. Welcome, Jacob.
Hey guys, so I'm quite similar to Selena and Sarah. I have a keen interest in waste management and hazardous waste as well, and moving towards that kind of cleaner production area within industry, and as Selena said, that circular economy that we need to strive towards. For me, Green Outlook is an exciting prospect because I see it as a really great platform, as everyone already said, to start a conversation. And I think where it's really going to resonate is, you know, the new generation of education and intellects coming through that are a lot more environmentally conscious. If we can set up a platform for that, I think that it'll make the next generation a lot more confident and stable moving forwards to bring their ideas. So I think it's a really great new initiative, especially by students, for students, and it puts someone into that younger generation gap as well, to show that, you know, we do have the knowledge and we do have new ideas, and to bring people together to express those with us.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Jacob. And finally, we have Nicole Carter, who is currently doing her fourth year in ecology and economics. Welcome, Nicole.
Yeah, so as you heard, I'm studying ecology and economics, and I'm really excited to be a part of the Green Outlook group, because I think the group and the panel we have tonight is really interdisciplinary, and I think we'll be able to learn a lot from each other. And I think having all these different perspectives, students' perspectives, come together and talk about environmental issues and potential solutions is really great. And I hope that because we're students, we might be able to communicate better to other students, and maybe even younger students and peers, to help them learn something, and also, you know, start developing our skills going forward.
Definitely, I completely agree, Nicole. And like you said, different age groups, different professions, different even educational backgrounds will help improve the conversation and then the ideas that are developed from it. So thank you so much to all of our panelists for being here. So the topic of discussion today is titled COVID-19, Environmental Impacts and New Opportunities. The first half of this year has been difficult for a myriad of reasons, and the pandemic has affected and awakened us to a lot of new harsh realities. However, for this panel discussion, we will be focusing on how the novel coronavirus has influenced the environment, for better or for worse. So without further ado, let's get started.
Great, thank you, Gopika. So my first question to the panelists is going to be quite relatable for our audience, and that is, what is an environmental outcome of COVID-19 that you've noticed in your daily life? So I'm going to hand this over to Strawberry. What do you think?
Thanks, Selena. So I've written a couple of bullet points. In summary, I think transportation is a really, really big thing that's changed for not only myself, but for my family, friends, and my friends around me as well. A lot of us are working from home nowadays, so we're not commuting to travel to work, especially people who live really far away from their workplace, say a 45-minute drive. They're not doing that anymore. They can stay home and work from home, which really, I think, reduces the amount of transportation that they have to do, because if you think about it, that would be about maybe an hour to 2 hours every single day. And then for this to be such a long-term thing, transportation really has reduced for us, which would obviously impact the environment, because the gases that are emitted as a result of transportation are quite significant.
Yeah.
Another thing that's different in relation to transport is public transport. I know that public transport has been sort of cut down really drastically since COVID-19, just because of social distancing and whatnot. And I do think a different perspective, it could be interesting to see whether or not people would want to take public transport after the pandemic, keeping in mind that, you know, it's contagious, I suppose.
Yeah, that's an interesting
sitting in such close vicinity as a lot of people.
My experience is a little bit similar to Strawberry as well, I guess, in terms of the density of population in certain areas, I guess, whether that's in a car or not. I work in retail, so I'm in the shopping centre at Garden City, and I've, noticed the difference between the amount of people there, the density. But my store, for example, we only closed for 2 weeks throughout the whole pandemic. So being in retail, we were still getting in stock quite frequently that wasn't selling as much. And again, all that stock comes wrapped in plastic, so we're still producing that and whatnot. And as far as I'm aware, we don't have anything to offset that. But also a difference in the way the fast food industry has been operating, because there's obviously lots of food retailers around. The ones that can't do takeaway have been suffering, unfortunately, especially things, like soups and noodles and stuff. That's, I don't like getting that for takeaway because spillage can occur. So yeah, very similar to Strawberry.
I guess something that I'm noticing though, like even though there is a lack, like there's less people commuting to work as like the COVID-19 restrictions are easing, I'm noticing, especially living like in a Brisbane area, that weekends are insane. There's so many people out, I'm in the West End area, and there's just so many people on the streets on the weekends, in the shopping, like in, grocery shops, and there's a lot of traffic. Like there's the same amount of traffic that you would usually get at like peak hour in the morning in Brisbane on a Saturday or a Sunday, just because I think people are desperate to be getting out again now that restrictions are slightly easing.
Can I just add to what Janet is saying there? So like I agree with Strawberry with the travel to work. Like I'm working from home as an intern, and that has its challenges. But it's definitely reduced my travel time, even though it was mostly on public transport. I mean, that's still, I guess, a contribution if you add up all those people catching the public transport. But with the people going out on the weekends, I think this is, it's a negative thing, I guess, with the transport, but it's also a huge positive because people, I go to places like Toohey Forest and Daisy Hill, and, even just the parks, so many people are getting out and enjoying nature. And I think, being cooped up and staying inside has made people appreciate what green space we do have and what parks we have. So I think that's like a really positive benefit, and it might lead to like people having a greater appreciation for how nice, Brisbane and its surrounds are.
Yeah. Definitely, there are two sides to every coin. So as much as a lot of inconvenience have been introduced into our lives, I think that there are positives, like people going out into open spaces and exploring what it's like to be out in the environment again. So thank you, panelists. All of them were excellent points. Sayli, would you like to give in your 2 cents into the conversation?
Yeah, I was saying that I agree with everyone here, but then I was gonna highlight a kind of like a negative aspect that right now we realize that transportations are banned and everything, but before COVID-19 had occurred, we were trying to get pooling was one of the concepts that was happening across the globe. But here now people are working from home, and they kind of realize how, they're not really happy with traveling with people. They want to have a faster world. And so I think once COVID is over, people are going to be more keen on traveling alone. And that is going to be a harmful thing, because there's going to be more pollution, more into cars and stuff, and the dependency on public transportation is going to decrease.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Sayli. I think there's a lot of ways that people are going to react differently in depending on their circumstances, and that's probably quite a possible way some people will react. Sarah, did you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, so I agree with all the points, but obviously from my point of view with the dental, the thing that we've most noticed the most is the fact that there's all these extra precautions that we have to take, and with each extra precaution there's an extra bit of rubbish. So like at both work and uni, all the patients have to do pre-procedural mouth rinses. So that mouth rinse comes in a plastic bottle, it's dispensed in a plastic cup, and at uni, like us students as well, we have to do it for every session. So that's like 100 students 4 times a day doing it on top of all the patients as well. So that's just a whole bunch of extra things going in the bin because of all the extra precautions. So,
and time consuming as well for the medical profession. I would imagine you can't do as many people, or if there's an emergency or whatnot, I imagine there'd be quite a large backlog as well.
Definitely, yeah.
That kind of
A lot
also,
of-
sorry, did you want to go, Gopika?
No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say that kind of also reminds me of how it just reminded me of stockpiling. And I was thinking that with people stockpiling all the time, maybe, the silver lining there could be that people are becoming more conscientious of what they're using. So they're less wasteful of it. They don't just throw things out on a whim because it's in such short supply. So I was thinking about that from a waste perspective.
Definitely. I mean, I love it. We covered so many aspects. We covered waste management. We talked about some positives, and we focused a lot on the transportation aspect and how this has affected our environment. And speaking of transportation, one major byproduct of using cars, trucks, planes is air pollution. And during the past couple of months, due to lockdowns, there has been significant reduction in any kind of transportation. So I would like to just pitch in a quick fact here that says that latest researchers show that nitrogen dioxide pollution over northern China, Western Europe, and the US has decreased as much as 60% in early 2020 as compared to the same time last year. So panelists, in your opinion, what do you think were the factors that contributed to this improvement in air quality?
So for me, I live in Surfers Paradise, and there's usually it's bustling and there's cars going everywhere. And like I particularly live on Chevron Island, and there's literally the whole island just becomes filled with traffic normally. For us, that just disappeared. So there was like no cars on the road. It took like no time to get anywhere. So we just noticed like a significant reduction in cars anywhere, but also like we personally didn't go out anywhere near as much. So I think everyone was just contributing.
And do you think this improved the air quality in that region? As in, were you able to breathe better, or any other indicators that you would say?
We I noticed there was less smog around, and like my family live in Brisbane, and usually when I drive up to Brisbane, I do notice a little bit of smog around Brisbane, which I have noticed has decreased quite a bit, which is nice because you like to be able to see things and breathe.
Absolutely. That is.
Yeah, could I just
go
first?
Okay.
I was just going to say, like, air pollution is a huge global issue. Like, I was doing this research who estimates there's 7 million people that die every year from air pollution, and that's a lot of like urban settings. They that's where like a lot of these like the deaths from corona like occurring is from these underlying issues that have been caused by air pollution. So I guess the air pollution, it has been a lot lower, and that's been really good, and that has given some sort of reprieve to even, because COVID attacks respiratory systems, so that is helping people get through it. But at the same time, the thing that's worrying is that if it's only temporary, because you've got industries that are now reopening and they are also running at a deficit, and you wonder if like they're going to be playing catch up, trying to catch up with all like the lost trade that they've been having through the pandemic.
Absolutely, that is definitely a concern. Nicole, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to bring up a similar point to Janet with, the air pollution being temporary, and, the issue of air pollution is such a huge problem every year. And I think in COVID, our focus has shifted from, these sort of issues that happen all the time to not from issues like the short term. Everything's changed in the short term. So we're looking at social distancing that's, becoming the new normal, but it's not really going to stay forever per se, but it's definitely changed how we live our lives now, particularly the shutdowns in manufacturing in China. When everyone had to stay at home and it was a strict lockdown, you're not going to have people going to work and doing manufacturing. And I think, you know, what really highlights how much our transport and, you know, air pollution has changed is that, you know, the price of crude oil was negative. So that is a huge drop. It's showing that, you know, we have way too much crude oil at the moment, and we can't even like store it. It's coming out of the ground so quick. And I think, you know, working out a way we can start thinking about how our lives have changed in Corona, and looking at how we can use transport less or work from home will really help, you know, reduce the air pollution and sustain these reductions in mortality from pollution.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think
when I was doing the research, sorry, you wanna go ahead?
No,
Jake?
go for it. No, go for it.
So like when connecting to the statistics that Gopika gave in the beginning, so like I'm an international student here, so most of my time here has been spent inside the house because I don't know much around, nor do I have my personal transportation. So connecting back to my home country, to India, air pollution is a huge issue. So when we think to our capital city, to Delhi, now who has set a limit of like particulates in the air to, they have a criteria of how many particulates you can have in the air to be 20. However, Delhi has their own city criteria to be 40 because that's how polluted it is. And generally, people have to travel in small, cover their face masks and stuff. During the COVID, India was a lockdown for like complete lockdown for over 2 months. And within a month, the situation in Delhi decreased to under 20 because there was no transportation, no industry work, no construction work. So that's how badly the environmental issue is, and sadly, it's only being highlighted in such a tragedy already occurring.
Definitely.
I guess
Jacob,
the lesson in that is that we only do things, we follow the path of least resistance as humans, and we only do things when we're forced to do it. I guess, and touching on what Janet said, obviously for me, I found this topic a little bit difficult to research just as a whole because the events are so recent. But I think the study that Janet was referring to about air pollution and it increasing COVID deaths was actually 8%, and they found that 1 microgram per meter cubed actually increases the likelihood of death or the mortality rate of COVID by 8%. There were a few factors that they couldn't put in that, like access to and quality of medical care as well, and other socioeconomic factors, but they put quite a lot of things in there. So I found that quite interesting as well. And I think also that probably we're going to see another increase in air pollution. I hate to be on the optimistic, I'm pessimistic, sorry, because I'm not normally like that. But I think unfortunately, the people who aren't looking at this situation as a whole, especially to do with air pollution in industry and manufacturing, etc., they're just going to find another way to produce what they want. And we've probably seen it with plastics and stuff as well, that, okay, well, certain areas we might be using less, but, you know, the plastic industry and syringes and stuff like that, they're producing more. So, and obviously, what do we need for that? We need oil, we need to mine, and stuff like that. So I think, unfortunately, it's probably getting lost in that as well.
I think
but probably a little bit more localized rather than a big global.
Yeah, I think you're onto a interesting concept there, Jake. I think everything we've discussed with this air pollution, like you said, it's a recent development, and we don't have many statistics on it yet. And we'll see all the impacts as they come through, and we change our practices over the next few months. It will be very interesting to see. Another thing that has been affected is investment in environmental projects. So this could be clean energy or clean technology. But my question to our panelists is, how has investment in environmental projects changed during COVID-19, and how do you think it will change after COVID-19? And I'm going to put this question out first to Nicole.
Yeah, so I mean, this is like a pretty big question, but in the short term, how has it affected finances during COVID-19? I was reading about this, and they said that because the price of oil has gone to, in the short term, to such a low amount, it's making clean energy, less competitive, because clean energy usually has advantage now because it is cheaper than fossil fuels. But if the oil price reduces so much, then that makes it harder for you to have your clean energy being more profitable.
Yeah.
And that's a short-term issue, because as we were discussing, we're probably just going to see our transport systems go back to what they were. But it is a sort of hurdle, and especially energy demand in the short term has gone down. Like I'm talking pretty short term here, but like during the crisis, energy demand has gone down because we've been reducing our, manufacturing, our commercial buildings have been turned off. But in the long term, there's a huge opportunity, because we're going to see a huge fiscal stimulus, because we're obviously, most nations are in recession now, so they're seeing growth rates below zero. So, the stimulus potential and the potential for that stimulus to be invested in green projects, so projects that help achieve net zero, is really huge.
Yeah,
and if
Nicole.
we do that, that'll be good.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this?
I guess
yeah, Janet?
Going further on what Nicole was saying, I guess at the moment it is very short term. Like we're still in the pandemic, so like this is still very new and very short term. And I guess if you're going from like the beginning of the year, at least in Australia, the Australian government had no credible transition plan for any sort of energy that didn't include like a greater use of gas. So they weren't, but even though we are part of like the Paris Agreement to lowering like or zero greenhouse gas emissions, so it's one of those things. It's like, now is the time to be making all these like radical changes and moving over to renewable energies, because it's now the cheapest source of electricity for majority of the world. But I guess something that, and it is a bit pessimistic, but I guess something that is worrying is that the global economy is really suffering through this pandemic. And I suppose that generally, if we're going like historically, a government is going to choose, if you've got to choose between environmental or between like economy, or like trying to boost that economy, generally the economy is going to win out in like a government body.
Yeah, thanks, Janet. Sarah, I'm interested to hear, do you have any insights into this, or maybe what we should be doing?
I'm not sure about what we should be doing, but with what Janet was saying, I had actually recently read something in the UK, so obviously not here, but because I think they had a lower demand for energy at the moment, they actually recently, they managed to overtake their fossil fuel demand. So like where all their energy comes from, more of it comes from renewable sources now than before. Which is actually exciting, and hopefully they can keep that up, because if they've managed to do that now, which obviously like it's different circumstances, but it's something that they can kind of be like, well, we managed to do this once, let's keep going. So hopefully they just use that as more incentive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really tough one to look at the investments in terms of sustainability or the environment. I think that time will tell, especially investments specifically in the environmental sector. They are a very long-term investment as well, so sometimes it's difficult to say whether or not it has paid off. I guess I personally think that it's going to have an immediate negative effect, but I think what it does do is that it gives us an opportunity to reset and move forward and say, okay, well, now actually let's do it this way. I know that the UN's been reporting that there's been an increase in social bonds investment in the sustainability development goals, which I think Sayli looks like she's nodding. I think there's 17 sustainability goals, and they're all about the environment, but one of the big ones is tackling like poverty and homelessness and healthcare, and their whole point of that is that that also has a positive effect on the environment as well. So there's been a huge boost in social bonds, so like stimulus packages and stuff are being given to governments, etc., to battle COVID, whether that is just for the public or for industry as well. So in that respect, and that was from the World Investment Report for 2020 as well. So I found that quite interesting that they're keeping track of all of that stuff. So yeah, I just thought it was interesting that it's investments in the sustainability goals as a whole as well.
Yeah.
My point of view on this aspect is that we're in such a bad situation that it has only brought us the aspects that we have been ignoring, that industrialists have been ignoring for a long time. However, so I think in the future, what would be happening is people would be more like the UN, the local governments, the country governments would be creating more stringent laws as to how the industries are going to operate, because of how they're realizing how bad the situation was already. But due to the COVID, I don't think so there's current investments that can be made, because everybody's already suffering. And I think one of the sectors which is only benefiting is the pharma industry, because everybody's trying to cure the virus. But however, the other investments, the positive investments, I don't think so seem to be happening during the pandemic. It's just a long term that will be seen after many years from the lessons taken from such a needed but unwanted tragedy.
Definitely. This is making us, sorry, continue, Jacob.
Oh, no, I was just going to say quickly, I guess it's, especially with investments, it's important to, like if you were somebody that had an investment problem because of COVID-19, it's really important to turn around and view that as an opportunity to invest in something else, because I think that while it does look a bit doom and gloom at the moment, that it has opened a lot of doors for investment, especially into environmental sectors. And also, once we get onto our other topics that we have planned for tonight, there's a lot of other opportunities in those as well. So I think, yeah, so basically all I was saying was that, replace the word problem with opportunity, because I think that will lead to a more positive outlook and to greener solutions as well, rather than saying, oh, it's a problem, how can we fix this the old way, you know? So, but yeah, jump in, Nicole, go for it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring through like two more points and a little bit of nuance to what we're talking about here, especially with the opportunities. So the opportunity, I guess, is quite huge, because we have short-term stimulus that the government rolls out, and then we have more long-term stimulus. And sort of the total stimulus we're looking at for the G20 countries is about 11% of their GDP, which is like a huge stimulus package. And, you know, the multipliers, or how much benefit we could get from investing that into clean energy is really quite large. So there's a large amount of economists and other advisors out there saying that we shouldn't be, in fact, investing more of our long-term stimulus into clean energy to create these jobs. And the EU has sort of already done this with a green energy recovery plan. So that's really good in the short, like in terms of the fiscal, and then in terms of the monetary. So our interest rates for loans are really, really low. So that makes it easier for, you know, startups and businesses to, you know, finance their investments and get access to loans. So I'll just give you guys some resources, you know, at the end to post about if you want to find more about this information.
Definitely. And looking at it from an economic point of view is, I mean, you've given us so many facts and figures, so that definitely quantifies it and creates a better picture. And I liked how the conversation took a turn towards how countries would end up prioritizing economic recovery over environmental recovery, because often to be able to focus on the environment itself is a privilege, and that's not extended to a lot of countries. So, so since that was an excellent talk session on that topic, so if we can move on to wildlife and forestry, I would like to pose a question, and that is, how do you think wildlife and forestry practices have changed because of COVID-19 and its subsequent lockdown? And I would like to start this conversation off with Jake. What are your comments on this?
I personally think that a lot of the world's forests are harvested illegally, logged illegally, even in terms of poaching and stuff like that. In terms of Australia, we're quite lucky because we have such a great environment to actually grow pencil pine. It grows very quickly, high turnover rate. Whereas the logging industry in Canada at the moment, they're still harvesting first generation trees as well. So to bring that in relation to COVID, I think it's important to look at viruses overall as a whole, and places where it's getting done illegally, the government is putting its law enforcement into other areas, and there's, I guess, where some people might see a problem, criminals again, they see an opportunity to jump in. There's less patrols for logging. I think Brazil harvests, I think maybe 60 to 90% of its forests are harvested illegally. So I think a lot of that's going on, and what that actually does is it brings humans closer with viruses as well. And there's been research that links the spread of COVID in Wuhan specifically to the fact that there's deforestation and bringing those animals closer with humans. And then the concentration, the density of those animals that could be infected is also closer as well. They're no longer spread out over a large habitat. So I guess it's about the habitat loss is quite
definitely bad. And all of this is linked with deforestation and logging for sure. But what if we speak about this more in terms of how the lockdown has perhaps increased the rate of deforestation and poaching? Would you say that it has increased substantially, or has helped curb this issue more?
No, sorry if I didn't make that clear. It's definitely increased illegal logging because nobody's out and about, and the law enforcement is being put in place to uphold those restrictions of staying in lockdown as well. So, yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that, Jake. Strawberry, do you have any thoughts on the wildlife or forestry?
So can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So just in regards to what Jake said, it's my research also showed that poaching and I guess illegally logged hunting and whatnot is in a drastic increase, especially in countries like Africa, where they don't have really alternative methods of income currently due to COVID-19, and so they sort of turn to poaching and things like that. But another thing that I found in my research is that they say that fish biomass has either increased or is expected to increase drastically due to the major declines in demands for seafood and thus fishing, which I thought was really interesting. And another thing that I read was that in the future, and this is probably something that we should circle back to later on when we talk about the future, but they also said that, as in relation to wildlife and forestry, in the future there could be bans in place regarding the consumption of wildlife, such as, which is what Jake sort of touched on before, because of how it carries the risk of being able to transfer infectious diseases or viruses to us.
Yeah, definitely. This pandemic has affected the rate of, how these produce is sold and bought. And I completely agree with what Strawberry has to say regarding this. So if we could take another spin on this, do you think that the unemployment rate recently in low income jobs has affected illegal activities in relation to wildlife and forestry?
Yes, I think the unemployment rate and the hardship, like the economic hardship, particularly in those developing countries, is affecting the exploitation of ecosystems. So this happened in the global financial crisis as well. And if we look back at that, they saw that poaching and deforestation increased in these times because, you know, it's easy to exploit resources when you don't have any jobs around, because it's your own work, you're your own employee, and you're just trying to find a market for those goods. So that increases. And then with COVID, it's made even easier to poach or do forestry, particularly in, I was looking at the example of Botswana, because there's no ecotourism. So normally you'd have your reserves with your elephants or your rhinos or whatever else is there, and you'd have lots of tourists around, and they act as a mechanism of protection for the environment because they're simply around. When they're not around, it's easier for the poachers to go in unnoticed and kill these animals.
Definitely. That is an interesting view, and that was not something that was brought up. So thank you, Nicole. I think that brings us to the end of this section of the conversation.
Yes, so the next thing we wanted to talk about is a big hot topic in the last few years, and that's plastic, in particular plastic packaging. So my first question for you guys is, how has plastic packaging changed during COVID-19, and particularly how are we using it, we as consumers using it differently? And I want to throw this out to Janet.
Oh, thanks, Selena. So I guess plastic waste generation, it's interesting because Queensland has made this initiative to go zero for single-use plastics by next year, mid-next year. And so we've seen during the pandemic is the single-use plastic generation has just skyrocketed because everyone's getting takeaway. People are ordering packages online. Like there isn't you're not going to shops anymore. You're not, everything's takeaway. So it's always single use. And restaurants, you're not going there, using their cutlery and then getting it washed and they reuse it. You're just getting, and no one's going to keep the takeaway containers that you get because they're flimsy. They're not something you're going to keep using. And so there's been a huge amount of that. And I assume that means there's been quite a lot more solid waste generation as well. And I guess there also is the fact that people are stuck in their homes. No one wants to be cooking at home. It's not exactly exciting to be hey, let's cook. It's more exciting to order something out at the moment and be oh, let's do something fun and order Uber Eats or get takeaway. So there has been a massive increase in plastic waste generation, I think.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, and
keep going, Sayli.
On the broader aspect of just looking at how people are stuck inside, how I have read around is that countries across the globe, there are bans on single-use plastic, but because industries, recycling industries and collection industries are closed currently, countries are lifting those bans, and hence there's currently more use of single-use plastic. And there was bans on you couldn't use plastic of certain thickness and certain thinness. But right now, because of the pandemic, there's the garbage industry is closed. You're allowed to sell those, and so there's use of those harmful plastics even more. And since there's just going in the garbage because there's no no staff working, it's causing more harm.
Definitely,
Yeah. And I think something that I think Sarah said this at the beginning, where she said that she works in the health industry, and I was thinking this as well when I was researching, is that in the health industry you'd expect there to be a substantial amount of single-use plastics in regards to masks, sanitation bottles, or even syringes, and gloves and whatnot. And they'd have to keep changing it because of how cautious we have to be in COVID-19. So I'd expect that also to really, really contribute significantly to plastic waste.
Yeah, with that, we've definitely noticed that there's because there's the extra precautions or extra things. So we're wearing the N95 masks and then a surgical mask and things like that. But weirdly, so the thing that I noticed the most that frustrated me is that we had a mask shortage, and then I would see people out in public wearing a mask, for starters, incorrectly, and then they'd be just throwing it on the ground. So not only were they not using it for its proper purpose, but second of all, they weren't even disposing of it properly.
Oh.
That leads me into another interesting question for you all is, have you noticed people disposing of plastic differently? Perhaps since we're all at home, we are not using the bins in the local area. How do you think this has influenced the impact of plastic on the environment?
I'll jump in. I guess, like, for me personally at home, any soft plastics, we put it in a bag and take it to, there's a few, I know that Woolies does it, I think Officeworks does it. There's a company called Red Cycle. So basically any plastic you can scrunch up, it's classed as a soft plastic, you can take to there for free and they recycle it. So that's something I try and do for source separation at home. I can't say that I've noticed of people disposing differently, I would say, of plastic, which is probably a negative thing, because it's all ending up in landfill. And depending, Australia is quite okay because we have very well engineered landfills. It's something we're very conscious of, and we're a wealthy country to be able to do that. But you've got places like South America, countries in Southeast Asia, huge problem in the Pacific Islands as well. They're all just disposing it of the same way that they normally do. We can get away with it because we already have those systems in place. But, you know, especially in the medical industry, we have the capacity to a lot of any hazardous waste, and you can probably comment on this, Sarah, or biological hazardous waste, such as like chemo bags and stuff like that. And contaminated things, it all gets incinerated, from my understanding and what I've looked into throughout my subjects. But yeah, I think it's really the way we dispose of it in this time has really negatively impacted it, and it causes going even back to air pollution. In the Pacific Islands, they use it to start their fires and cook their food. They build their houses on plastic, and because they don't produce, they import everything. And it all comes wrapped in plastic, but they don't have anywhere to dispose it or put it in. And then in Southeast Asia, you've just got open dumps where they throw everything in and they just burn it again. So you've got multiple, again, it's a large topic. Sorry, I know that I'm talking a lot, but yeah, it's a multitude, creates a multitude of problems. But I guess the biggest one is probably getting into waterways, I think. So.
Yeah, and even to answer Selina's question that she posed just really briefly, like even with the whole stockpiling thing that everyone's doing during COVID-19, you would expect there to be a significant amount of plastic, because by the time they realize that they didn't actually need all of this extra produce, they're just going to throw it away and it'll just contribute to waste. So that's another thing that I hadn't thought of.
Yeah, definitely. And everything comes packed in plastic material. And I like how we touched on different sources of this plastic as well. So, I mean, we've had an excellent chat. We talked about the air quality. Oh, sure, Nicole, sorry.
Yeah, I think a big problem going forward is, as well, consumer habits. So now that we're used to going to a coffee shop and getting a takeaway coffee, that's probably inhibited that movement of bring your own cup, because it's not allowed now. You go to a coffee shop, even in ease restrictions, you're not allowed to use your keep cup or any form of, you know, bring your own mug. So I think, you know, in terms of consumer habits changing, this has probably brought this back a bit, and then we'll need to be, you know, once we're allowed or it's deemed safe to use our own keep cup and things, we'll have to really push that to get it back on the agenda.
Definitely agree with that.
Yeah, can I just touch on what Nicole just said, like how there's just extra use of plastic, and now how our main topic tonight is about how COVID is affecting it, and so how there is research that, you know, COVID is just not passed on person to person, but it lasts on plastic. And with this increasing plastic, even though there is research to cure the people with the infection on the virus on the plastic is never going to die until it's all cleared out. So again, we're just creating more risk of the virus not ending.
Yeah, it can last up to 72 hours on plastic, whereas I think paper and cardboard was like 24 or something like that.
Increasing risk of exposure, and that's definitely a concern. And we've been talking a lot about a pre-COVID world and a post-COVID world. So that brings us to our next section, which is what is next? What is a post-COVID world going to look like? So scientists and experts are concerned for a post-COVID world and how environmental consequences may take a back seat as the economy recovers. And we've touched on this while we were talking about air quality and wildlife and forestry investments in green projects. So if there's something else to add, how else do you think, or what can we expect from a post-COVID world, speaking in an environmental context?
An interesting topic that I had read, it was that because we have going to the deforestation topic, that because there's so much of lack of forests and how much there's we all eat animals, we're non-vegetarians and stuff, how because of the deforestations there's higher chances of such viruses reoccurring in future, and the existence of plants and trees act as buffer zones. That's why previously, even though the population is large, the virus doesn't travel as much because the animals don't travel, the people don't travel, and it's just situated and it's easier to control and cure. So the post-COVID situation is of countries and governments looking at how to improve forests, so the impact of these viruses is fewer.
Yeah, can I jump in and talk about this on like quite a large sort of scale? I just like to acknowledge what was just said there, because COVID's happening in humans, but it has happened, not COVID exactly, but virus outbreaks in agriculture are a huge threat to our food system. And we've seen this in I'm sorry, I forgot the exact name of the disease, but in pigs, there's this big loss of pig populations used for agriculture from a virus in China. I think it's about 60% has been lost there because we have, a huge reliance on only a few species in pigs. So I think, there's a lot to learn from COVID going forward, and maybe trying to diversify and change agriculture. But a separate issue from that was a little sidetrack. But I really wanted to point out that this is a crisis where our government has responded. And I think there is a lot to learn about science communication and policy in that political sphere. Issues to do with the environment have uncertainty, have complexity, and have scientific experts. And, this is common between issues in climate change and issues of COVID. The only difference is, climate or environment issues play out slower. And I think we've got a lot to learn on getting the experts and how we communicate to the public to get action to happen. I think with how we've had the National Cabinet in Australia and having, our health directors being really, a key player in communicating and having a unified voice on the science. I think if we had that in environmental issues, that perhaps we could create that change a lot easier. And it showed that, the government can act in a crisis and have really big changes, put upon the public in a short amount of time. So we can act.
Yeah, this period has proved a lot about what we can do if we put our mind to it at a governmental level, and that is impressive. So in your opinion, do you think that moving forward, we would do so for environmental aspects as well?
I mean, I think we have to. I don't think we have very much choice. I was reading from the Smith School that this year we're expecting an 8% reduction in CO2 emissions. And in order to achieve the Paris Agreement, we need to have an 8% reduction every year until 2030 to achieve the 1.5 degree standard. So I don't think we have much choice. And I think it's about, the scientific community and our young people and those regulators to come across and go to the government and go to our policy, go to our elected officials and say, here, we want to do the same thing for environmental issues. We're going to follow this model. It's worked. Let's make it work for these issues.
Very interesting.
Okay.
Yeah,
I guess that sorry, you go. Sorry.
I was just going to say that, touching on what Nicole said, she's absolutely right, where, you see companies and I guess what you'd call the macro level of society able to act on something and able to make change pretty drastic in what is considered a relatively short amount of time compared to what we've seen in previous years. And in my research, I also found that on a micro level, so just on an individual basis, social science has shown that interventions during times of great change have also impacted the way that people change their habits. So for example, people were given e-bikes during a study and they had their cars taken away. And as soon as they got their cars back, they saw a marked decrease in the amount of people that would actually use their cars, and more people would use their e-bikes. And in a similar study in a different country, they had a motorway that was cut off. And so people weren't able to drive themselves there for a really long amount of time. And so they were forced to use public transport. But after the road and the motorway was reinstated, most people actually who did used to drive to work themselves ended up using public transport more often. So I think it's really interesting. On a macro level, people can make changes really quickly if they want to. Yeah. And on a micro level, it also shows that during times of great change, like in COVID-19, people tend to adapt their behaviours quite positively, I think, in regards to the environment.
Yep. And I go ahead, Janet. Sorry.
Just like touching on what Nicole was saying and Strawberry, I guess that at the moment we're really in the immediate effects of COVID, and now it's going to be sort of the long-term effects. So we're not really sure, but this is sort of the time where markets and regulations can be adjusted, like, because they do need to be adjusted. And they need to be done on a huge scale. They need to be done on like country scale, the global scale. These regulations need to be changed because, our main uses, at least in Australia, for our fossil fuels is for power generation, for industrial processes and household use, which is basically what makes the country keep going. So I suppose that now would be the time when everything is a bit quieter to be really like investing more money into renewables and into building a circular economy that is more sustainable and that we actually can go forward using it, because even though it does take a lot longer to invest in, or it's a lot like a longer term investment in environmental sort of or renewable, it's now's the time to be doing it. Like when industries are slowing that slow.
Definitely. I agree.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
Jacob, want to add anything?
Yeah, I just think life after COVID in general, and even in an environmental sense as well, I think it's going to be really disconnected and really disjointed in the sense of each country and everybody around the world is trying to deal with this not only in their own way, but in their own capacity in what they can and can't do. I know, like, I've been following it like quite closely because I'm really interested to see the numbers and what's going on. I've been following the States quite closely. 26th of June, they had 40,000 new cases in one day, and it's trending upwards. Which in my point of view, in terms of, environmental investment, and even in Iowa, they're having to kill pigs. It's a bit of a not highly reported thing. They're trying to investigate it, but they're killing pigs en masse in the pork industry, and things like that because of coronavirus. So I think in terms of, we're going to see a big shift in the dynamic of world economy. South Africa is meant to have 200,000 cases by end of July. And the problem they've struggled with is they have, and I didn't know this before coronavirus, but they have 9 different official languages just in South Africa. So trying to communicate that, I'm not bilingual, but a few of you in the group are. And, if you come to an English speaking country, you have one news channel, it might be SBS Arabic or whatever. They have the Chinese news and stuff, or on Sky News and stuff. They only have one channel. So it's not like it gets reported a lot. But yeah, I think it's going to be really disjointed times after COVID. And I think that things like the recycling industry is really suffering because it's just cheaper to keep making it new. As we said the oil prices are so low, things like that. And I think it's hard to put a metric on whether it's going to be positive or negative at the moment. And I've had that conversation with Gopika a little bit before this.
Yeah, definitely. It's uncertain times. Sarah, would you like to add something?
Honestly, like for me, I really hope that we do use this opportunity. Because obviously from an economic point of view, we're trying to keep people in jobs, but they could be using this opportunity to fund things that give people jobs rather than hand out the dole, which obviously I'm actually a receiver of the dole, so can't really complain too much. But at the same time, you know, they, rather than it targeting people, it should be targeting economies or different aspects of the economy, and then using people to feed into that and that keeping our economy going.
Definitely. That is an interesting spin. I agree completely.
Yeah, me too. And I think we've reached a point here where we are here all because we're interested in the environment. So we're all looking at how we could improve it. But honestly, we need to reach a point where people other than the environmentalists realize that the situation has come because of our own past actions and how people in general need to be improving. And I think agreeing with Sarah, we have to focus on economy, not the people, that a greater body, like the government has to create strong regulations for the people within who don't really have the reach to do something, that they can do the minimal within their houses, so there's an overall change.
Yeah, absolutely, Sayli. And thank you all. And I see this as the first step where university students, we are the future leaders, and we're not all studying environment. And that is brilliant because we're all passionate about the environment, and it's going to require a lot of cross-discipline solutions. Everyone doing their part, all of our industries represented here and all of the other industries doing their part to help solve this really big global issue and the multiple issues that we're having. So I just wanted to recap some of the things that we talked about, and that was firstly going back to air quality. We talked about that it's a dynamic parameter and it has changed through COVID. It's still changing now based on our fossil fuel use and the different producers of air pollution. And this is going to change into the future, and hopefully we can have some positive change with new environmental policies, which takes us to our environmental investments, which seem like they're struggling at the moment in the short term, but there is a lot of opportunity. We've brought up many times, a lot of opportunity for us to invest in clean technology and clean energy, and we can take the next step forward by rethinking our investments, and countries focusing on environmental sustainability in their capacity that they have to do so. We then talked about wildlife and how poaching and forestry have increased due to the short-term benefits that those industries can offer, and people don't have many alternatives, especially in developing countries, which is so unfortunate, and it's definitely not sustainable. We then talked about how a lot of extra plastic waste is being produced and ending up in landfill, and in developing countries where we don't see sanitary landfills, it's often being burnt or going into the waterways, which causes marine life damage and also air pollution when it's burnt. So there's some big problems there, and we can't keep doing these, using so much plastic, which brings us to the last thing that we discussed, and that was the consumer behavior and how this is going to change into the future. And I think that we discussed that countries have a powerful impact, that's for sure. We've seen that, we've seen their response to COVID-19, but people also have a powerful impact, us as consumers and us as future professionals as well. And we can adapt in a crisis. And like I think all of us are thinking, and all of us have talked about throughout this discussion, is that these are actually opportunities for us, and this is a great time to be having these conversations. And for all those listening, for all those students, and for all those professionals, this is what a bunch of university students that are passionate about the environment in different disciplines, this is what we're thinking about, this is what we're discussing, and this is what we want to bring to the table as we are the future environmental leaders. And yeah, I'm really glad we had this discussion, and I really got a lot out of this experience. So I want to thank you all very much for being part of this, for all our panelists and our audience, and I hope we can continue this dialogue. And so this is what I've got out of this, and I'm interested to hear what my co-host, Gopika, has learnt from this discussion.
Definitely. I think, Selena, you covered most of it. And honestly, coming into this, I'm taking more than I ever expected to learn. I mean, even about each of the sections which we came up with ourselves, we had discussions between each other. And I feel like we touched up on very specific bits of it. And having this conversation with all of us from different disciplines, different backgrounds, I've learned so much more. And I learned that I have so much more to learn as well, which is very impressive. And honestly, that's what we wanted, creating Green Outlook. So I'm really happy with what we've created here. But I would also like to invite our panelists to describe their experience and give closing comments. So I'd like to start off with Sarah Pratten. What did you think? What are your thoughts on the panel discussion we had today?
Honestly, I learned so much from everyone. Like, I have a personal love of this discussion, but there's just, when you have so many people from different backgrounds, you learn so much more, and I really appreciated the opportunity.
Thank you, Sarah. Sayli, your thoughts?
First of all, I want to say congratulations, guys, on the first event of you guys have hosted. It was wonderful, and it was really nice of you to have multidisciplinary university students here. And honestly, it was a great experience to be able to talk to postgrad and undergrad students, because no matter what your age is or how experienced you are, there's always a new learning there. And I think this is a great concept that you have brought her forward, and I think you should go more with this. And I wish we discuss more of this and learn a lot more from such a platform.
Thank you so much, Sayli. Your encouragement means so much to us. What about you, Janet? What are your thoughts? What have you taken away from the experience?
I found this really interesting. It's just seeing everyone's perspectives, and it's not only that everyone's multidisciplinary, they're also interested in different areas. So it's very interesting hearing everyone's takes, because, you know, I have a certain take and then someone comes from like a different perspective and I'm like, oh, wow, okay, I didn't even think of it from that side. And so it's been really good to like just sort of bounce off each other. So yeah, thank you so much, Gopika and Selena, for making Green Outlook something that a platform that we could all share our ideas. It was great.
Thank you so much, Janet. Strawberry, would you like to give us some comments?
Yeah, so pretty much just the same as what everyone else said. It was really nice to hear everyone's perspective on it. I think it was really interesting when we talked about things that I probably wouldn't have even thought about, which were regarding what's happening in other countries and maybe even lesser developed countries, what's happening on an economic perspective, on the large scale and on the small scale. So it was really interesting to hear everyone's perspectives, and I think it was really nice to have, I guess, what I consider industry professionals, or perhaps industry professionals in the making, and what their opinions would be. So thank you, guys.
Definitely. Thank you, Strawberry. We were really glad to have you here. Jacob, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was really excited when you asked me to be a part of this. I think it's awesome, an awesome initiative, and you have to start somewhere, and I'm happy to do that with you guys and support you guys in doing that, because I think it's really important. No matter what anyone says, is, you know, someone might watch this and be like, oh, you know, whatever, still at uni, doesn't matter, whatever their thoughts may be. Like, you have to start somewhere, and I can see this going somewhere and becoming quite big, at least in the university world as well, on a starting point. And I can't wait for this discourse to move to in-person, so we can have a much more free-flowing discussion as well, because as Janet knows, I love to talk a lot and I'm very passionate about a lot of ideas. So yeah, thank you so much, guys.
Definitely, Jacob. We hope to bring this in person as soon as possible as well. And finally, Nicole.
Yeah, I'm really amazed, guys. Selena and Gopika, this is like the most successful discussion I've had with university students all semester. So I think, you know, we really need to get more students involved and discussing these issues and getting people optimistic and understanding the challenges of where we are at the moment. And I think, I hope people watch this and find this interesting, and I'm looking forward to their comments. I'm looking forward to seeing them in the next, the next meeting, and maybe we can have even more with lots of people.
Yeah, definitely. I'm actually really glad that you said that, because that was the fundamental idea behind the conception, which was to create a platform where people who are interested can come together and chat about these things and like kind of get it out there, saying that we are also thinking about it and it is important to us as well. So thank you, Nicole, for that. Selena, would you like to share some of your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Gopika. I think I've really enjoyed this experience working with these amazing panelists, helping them prepare for this meeting, and they've been working with us really well and being very patient with us too as we've developed our ideas. So I just want to say a big thank you to them, and for any future panelists that might be interested, students, university students that want to get involved. If you guys want any guidance, these are our first installment ambassadors. So contact them, and I'm sure they'll be more than willing to share their experiences with you. But this has been so eye-opening in many respects, organizing events. And I'm really grateful that we've been able to put this together for our viewers and our panelists.
Yeah, thank you, Selena. I mean, you were touching up on my comments, which I was going to get to, but definitely, I completely agree. Thank you to all our panelists for joining us for this first installment of Green Outlook. In my opinion, I think that we have achieved the objectives that we set out to get done, Selena, and we could not have done this without our brilliant group of panelists. So let's give them a round of applause. Good job, guys.
Congrats, everyone.
Also, a big thanks to our mentors, supporters, and viewers who have encouraged us through this journey. We would love to hear your comments and thoughts on this topic and what we have discussed. As Selena mentioned earlier, we will be adding some interesting resources that we mentioned during the talk with the video. So if you wish to learn more about them, it's just a click away. And finally, again, as Selena mentioned, if you're interested in participating in the second installation of Green Outlook, please feel free to contact Selena or myself and be part of the global environmental dialogue. So let's continue to create this network of environmentally minded students and professionals. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.